Well, I want to welcome everybody to the Friday afternoon. It's the first and the third Friday of each month where we have an interactive webinar here on sex and healing relationship. I am Debbie McRae. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am located in Mesa, Arizona, and my specialty is working with those who are dealing with sex addiction. And I have a heavy emphasis on working with betrayed partners. And today we're going to continue on with the discussion we had last month. I believe it was on the 23rd of June, where we started talking about empathy and how empathy is so foundational for rebuilding and healing a relationship after betrayal. We talked the last time a bit about what gets in the way of empathy. Today, we're going to talk about what builds empathy. And this really is going to focus on what the betrayed partner needs. This is not only what I've studied and read about, but it's what I actually hear clients come in and share with me. So I do want to review just a few things about why empathy is so very important in the healing process, especially from this type of betrayal or relational trauma. Well, first of all, we have to have empathy in order to trust again, especially the betrayed partner, because it demonstrates to the betrayed partner that the addict partner can understand where they're at, how they feel, hold space for them, and then get into sync with the betrayed partner's feelings rather than denying their feelings and not allowing them to feel. Empathy creates safety, so the partner wants to move towards the addict partner. So it's a very, very important component. An addict partner must commit to learning about empathy. It's a skill set we can learn. Most of us were not taught how to have empathy. One of the problems the addicts have is they don't know how to understand emotions and deal with emotions. And this is one of those higher level emotions, and I should say skill sets that are something that we each need to learn and work on. I believe it's part of the amends process. I need to be able to step into somebody else's shoes and understand how my behaviors have affected them and take accountability for it, and then verbalize that, validate the feelings, the experience of the betrayed partner. I also want to stress that empathy is not just limited to this recovery and this healing period. Empathy is something that the couple needs to work on, not only during the repairing of their relationship from that point forward. Empathy is always going to be a part of their life and their relationship, just like all the recovery skills and tools are part of, your lifelong skill set. So empathy actually creates space for deeper healing, deeper connection. So I'm going to just share a little bit from Brene Brown's research, how she sees empathy, because I think this is also kind of adds to what we talked about the last time. She says that empathy is this. Empathy is connecting with people so we know that we're not alone when we're in struggle. Empathy is a way to connect to the emotion of another person and what they're experiencing. Empathy doesn't require that we experience the same emotion that they're going through, but we are seeking to understand it. We want to understand what the other person is feeling. It's about how they are feeling, not about how you are feeling. And it is a practice, like I said, that grows over time. So some of the attributes of empathy that are really important are the fact that with empathy, I step into a space where I am kind. I am curious. Oftentimes I will say to clients, instead of getting defensive, let's step into some curiosity and say, tell me more about that. I'm curious. How do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way? What causes you to feel that way? And then that way it takes us down deeper and deeper into the empathy. Keep in mind that you don't need to fix it. You're not there to fix the situation or make the person feel better. You're just there to understand how that person is feeling. And we can do that by kind of tuning into ourselves and imagining what it would be like if we were in that situation. What would it be like for us? It helps the betrayed partner know that they are not alone. So even if you've never experienced that exact situation, we do have common feelings. We can connect in our feelings. That's where empathy takes us. Also, empathy lets us share with gratitude that we appreciate the betrayed partner has shared those deep feelings, those concerns, those hard emotions. Now, oftentimes people confuse empathy with sympathy. So I want you to think about the difference between being alone and being connected. Sympathy is, I feel bad for you because you're dealing with something hard or you're experiencing something that nobody else is experiencing. And that is a very lonely feeling. Whereas empathy is, I feel with you. So I am connecting with you. One of the big hiccups in couples recovery in betrayal is that we oftentimes don't think of the empathy as connection, as it creating connection. And instead we get into our defensiveness, which creates disconnection. So I can't be defensive and I can't have empathy at the same time. They just can't coexist. So I'm going to give you some steps right now as far as what the addict partner can do that is going to assist the betrayed partner. And this is going to focus on empathy builders right now. So we're going to talk about 8 of them. And it's actually, I'm going to give you some ideas, some practical applications on how this actually works in recovery and how you'll implement it. So builder number 1 is educate yourself. So an addict partner needs to educate themselves on what their choices have done to the betrayed partner and the effect that it has had on their partner. So with this, I've got to go inward and educate myself about the whole process, not only my addiction, but that includes part of my inward focus is trying to understand how my betrayed partner feels. You need to learn about how betrayal trauma presents itself, what betrayal trauma feels like, how women and men who are experiencing betrayal trauma might be feeling and what they might be doing. This is where the safety seeking comes in. And so I would encourage addict partners to read Rob Weiss's book, Codependence, because he talks about safety seeking in there. Go back and look at some of my webinars I've had on safety seeking, because if an addict partner can understand that safety seeking really is about making sure that the connection is safe, then we can look at it a different perspective. Briefly, I've mentioned in the past that safety seeking is on a spectrum, one end unhealthy, the other end much healthier. So in recovery, in the healing recovery for a betrayed partner, we're working on bringing that safety seeking down so it's much healthier as they work in their healing and they start to feel more grounded and out of that crisis part in their recovery. Excuse me. Another couple of books I would recommend that the addict partner turn to educate themselves. One is Stephanie Carnes has a great book called Courageous Love. And in there, she does talk a lot about the addict partners stepping into and trying to understand why the betrayed partner is doing what they're doing. Another one is Carol Jurgensen Sheets, Helping Her Heal. Oftentimes, if I have an addict that's really struggling with understanding empathy and how to support a betrayed partner, I will refer them to her workbook and have them start working in the workbook. Sometimes I will even assign them to work with their betrayed partners and maybe work on certain elements of that workbook together. And that's very, very effective. Ask your betrayed partner what resources they would like you to learn more about. I oftentimes have my betrayed partners suggest to the addict partners they read Rob Weiss's book, Out of the Doghouse, because I love how straightforward it is. He doesn't hold any punches. And I think sometimes the addict partner really needs to hear it like that. You've got to really dig deep into your own recovery and learn about the effect also that your denial about your addiction and your shame is creating in the disconnection of your relationship. And that is a lot of work right there. So read Brene Brown's book on shame, and her just basic book, I thought it was just me, but it isn't, really gets into just the bones of shame and what it really is. So we're going to talk a little bit more about denial and shame in one of the next steps, which is number 2. And this empathy builder is really doing your own work. So get serious with your own healing. Put both feet in. Decide you're going to do it. Don't string your betrayed partner along with a little bit here and a crumb there, because that creates more distress. It increases their trauma responses. Focus on your own recovery. And that in the beginning stages is breaking through the denial and the shame. Now, it's hard, like I said, if we're in denial and I'm having shame, I can't get to empathy yet because there's a piece in there that I have to look at, and that's accountability. And so it's almost like there are different steps in your own work that you need to do that's really important, because if I'm in my shame, I cannot focus on how the other person is feeling, because when I'm on my shame, it's all about me. And it's usually I'm defensive, or I'm running away, I'm avoiding, or I'm shutting down, and I can't fully show up for the betrayed partner. If you have a qualified CSAT therapist, somebody who understands sex addiction, a really good sponsor, they're going to focus on that denial and that shame. They're going to be real with you about that. They're going to call you on it when you're stuck in it. If you go into your therapist and your therapist never discusses shame, is never working with you on getting to the root of your shame, what caused your shame, what's the trauma that goes along with that shame, and if they don't have the skill set to help you process through that trauma, then I really highly recommend you get a different therapist. Check with those people that are doing well in recovery. Check with your sponsors. A lot of your sponsors or people that you're attending 12-step programs with will know who good therapists are. I have had clients share with me even recently that as they've gone to their own 12-step programs for healing their betrayal trauma, that as they talk to women who are feeling secure and feeling hope in their relationship, it's because their partners are really doing the work. There is no denial. They're taking full accountability. They're doing whatever they can to heal the relationship. And part of that is doing their own work. So remember that effort and action goes a long way with a betrayed partner. So if the addict partner will just try and keep doing it, a betrayed partner does not expect perfection. They just need to see evidence that the addict partner is trying to do their work and trying to move towards empathy. Because believe me, it takes practice. We're going to make mistakes in stepping into empathy and expressing that to another person, especially the betrayed partner. Okay. Empathy builder number 3, develop an attitude of humility. So with this, you've got to really be humble, embrace and accept your behaviors that you need to, and admit when you make a mistake, because we all make mistakes. We are human. You need to have an attitude that you're the one that caused the betrayal. It was your actions, rather, that caused the betrayal. You have responsibility there. And you need to acknowledge that and express that to the betrayed partner. They need to hear you say that. It makes them feel less crazy. It makes them feel like you're in it with them. It makes them feel more understood. So you've got to take that accountability, that attitude of humility. It's so important. They need to see you make some kind of effort, even if it's a really bad effort, even if it sounds very, at first very robotic. At first it sounds forced. It might even sound outside of what they've ever heard you say, but step into it with humility and just do it. In this place of humility, the addict partner needs to ask some questions. And they need to ask these questions of themselves, and then another one we're going to talk about in regards to their betrayed partner. So the first question is, how does my partner feel when I do this? So if I have a tendency to say I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock, and I know I'm going to be home at 6:05, right? If I know my partner who's experiencing betrayal trauma is going to be triggered if I'm late, I need to step in and ask myself, how's my partner going to feel if I'm going to be 5 minutes late? And you're probably going to recognize that you need to call and let your betrayed partner know. It's really important. How would I feel if my betrayed partner was being this defensive with me? How would I feel if my betrayed partner was blaming me? It's really important we step into that and ask ourselves. The next one is, what can I do for you in this moment to help you heal? That's a great question for an addict partner to just keep in their tool set. So if there's disconnection, if you're trying to understand where your partner's at in that moment, let go of the shame, let go of the denial, step into that place of humility, and ask your betrayed partner, what do you need in this moment from me? That's going to give you such a big clue as to how you can meet them and connect with them. Because believe me, the betrayed partner is going to share with you what they're feeling in that moment, and you're going to go from there. Okay. The next one is number 4, empathy builder, is stop justifying and minimizing. So justification and minimization really fuels disconnection, and here's why. Instantly, when an addict partner goes into these types of behaviors, the betrayed partner in that moment knows this person's not trustworthy, they're not truly in recovery, because in that moment, you're not recognizing the impact that your addiction has had on your partner. And that's very, very important. So what this might look like is you might not tell your betrayed partner the full truth. You might just tell them truthful things, but not all of it, because maybe you're concerned that he or she is going to overreact. That's minimization. It might be that you're not sharing a slip. So you justify that, oh, today's not a good day. You know, my betrayed partner's really in a bad mood, or they're really struggling today. So I'm going to wait until tomorrow. Then tomorrow comes and you justify waiting until the next day. It is a big deal to justify and minimize to the betrayed partner. They can recognize when you're doing it. So if you don't know what it looks like, turn to your betrayed partner and ask them, when I'm minimizing, what are the things I say and I do? And when I'm justifying things, what do you hear me say and do? It's really important that you understand that. Here's another thing that I find when an addict partner justifies and minimizes. They have a tendency to go into therapy and into group, and they oftentimes will make the focus of their work in those moments about the betrayed partner. So instead of focusing on here's what I'm struggling with, here's what I'm doing that's not healthy, instead I'm going to make it about what my partner is doing and how she's treating me or he's treating me and how unfair it is and how unkind it is. And I see at times that there are therapists that unwittingly or unknowingly get kind of pulled into it, and they become kind of in this dynamic with the addict partner that Brene Brown refers to as common enemy intimacy. All of a sudden, we're creating this connection in therapy, and it's because we're talking about the betrayed partner and all that he or she is doing wrong. A good therapist is going to not allow you to do that, and they're going to really hit it hard and ask you, what is it that you're doing that would cause your betrayed partner to say this or do this? It's really important that your therapist challenges you on this, because you're not going to really be in recovery if you don't get to that point. You just aren't. Now, there is an exception, because there are times where betrayed partners are struggling so severely with rage. They may have some underlying conditions that they might not be aware of, some psychological conditions. They may have their own previous traumas. They may go into rage, and in that rage, they can become abusive. This is the case. In this case, a betrayed partner really needs to be understood. Boundaries need to be put into place by the addict partner. So that is something that is, I think, a very healthy thing to do. You do need support in a situation like that. But if you're going in day or session after session, group after group, and instead of talking about yourself and your own recovery, and you're making it about your betrayed partner, you need to shift that and change that. Okay. Empathy builder number 5, it's perspective taking. So I'm referring to the willingness to be able to see and feel the world through the eyes of the betrayed partner. So I'm looking at life through their lenses. I'm not agreeing with what they're actually saying. I'm just trying to understand it. We all see the world through our own lenses. Each of us have lenses for certain things, like it could be our sex, it could be our ethnicity, it could be our ability to do things, it could be our education. We have other lenses that are about our insight, our personal experiences, our family stories. All of these lenses are unique to each person. The problem is that when I'm not perspective taking, I am looking at the situation through my own lenses, and I'm coming to a judgment. So when I'm in empathy, I am putting down, I call it my telescope with all my colored lenses in it that I filter the situation through. I'm setting it aside. And in that moment, I'm picking up my betrayed partner's lenses and I'm trying to filter and look at the situation, how they are seeing it through all those different lenses that I just talked about. So empathy requires perspective taking. I have to be able to get out of my own stuff, step out of my own shoes, put down my own telescope with my own lenses, and step into my partner's shoes and look at life through their lenses. It's very, very important. You have to do that. So you've got to put aside your own stuff and you have to listen to what the betrayed partner is going through. So one of the things I will tell addict partners to do, if it's really hard to sit in that and you want to jump in and tell them how they're wrong, what you're going to need to do is put up your invisible shield. You're just going to sit there and you're going to listen for the feeling words. You're not going to listen as to how you're going to argue against that point, how that point is wrong, why it's not true. No, we're going to focus on the feeling words, and that's where we're going to go. So that requires empathy step number 6, to stay out of judgment. So when we judge another person's experience, it discounts them. It discounts the pain that they're experiencing. It discounts their journey. So you have to stay out of judgment. Oftentimes we protect ourselves by going into judgment. So it does take skill to learn how to recognize when you're going into it. Typically when there's shame, there's blame. So there is that connection there. So you do need to work on that. You've got to be open to what your betrayed partner's feeling and refrain from making comments that invalidate those feelings. Oh, you don't feel that way. Oh, that's ridiculous. You're making such a big deal out of it. I don't know why you're getting so upset. When are you ever going to get over this? Those things are so painful to hear. And remember, we do that because we're judging the person, we're judging the situation, we're judging the words that they're saying. So that is something we've got to do, is step out of judgment. Empathy builder number 7, and that is we've got to focus on recognizing the betrayed partner's emotions rather than the words they're saying. Now, we talked about with an addict partner, one of the reasons they're experiencing addiction is they don't know how to manage their emotions, identify their emotions, work through their emotions, express their emotions. And so now we're saying to them, okay, not only do you have to understand your own emotions and start learning this in your recovery, but now you've got to also understand your betrayed partner's emotions. So what you're going to do is you're going to look within yourself in a moment when you're with a betrayed partner, and you're going to try to understand how that partner's feeling in the moment. If I were in their shoes, could I feel like this? So I'm going for the feeling. I'm not going for all of the other words that's being said. So if I hear the word hurt, or if I hear the word, I feel betrayed, or if I hear the word, I feel so sad, I feel so lonely, that's where we're going to go. That's where the focus is going to be. That's where the addict partner then is going to willingly acknowledge the betrayed partner's feelings. And if they can't name it in that moment because they're sharing all these things, maybe you can step in and name it. Oh, I imagine that you feel hurt when that happens. Or that sounds like it would be so sad to experience that. I know if I had that happen to me, I would feel like that. Check in and ask them. Ask them, it sounds like you're frustrated. Are you feeling frustrated? You know, I'm sorry, it sounds like you're feeling so sad about that. If they can't understand what they're feeling and they go, no, I don't know what I'm feeling, right? Then just sit with them. Let them talk and share their feelings. If worse comes to worse, just sit with them and reflect back the exact words you heard them say as far as their feelings go. Oh, you're feeling hurt. Oh, I hear you saying you're feeling sad. Or I hear you say you're so frustrated about this situation when I don't do this, this, and this. Start there. And then add to that, I would feel frustrated too if it were happening to me. It's very, very simple once you learn that skill set. You've got to practice it again and again and again. Okay, last empathy builder. Listen to learn so that you can communicate effectively. It is impossible to develop empathy without developing, practicing, and using your listening skills. It's often hard for the addict partner to sit and listen because of their own shame and their own guilt. So here's the analogy I use. When somebody is sharing hard things with me that involve me, that I'm included on, I imagine that I'm holding this special bucket in front of me that I am going to lovingly allow all their feelings to go into. And I'm going to do that while I'm sitting there and hearing it, instead of being a sponge that as those feelings are coming at me, I'm absorbing it and taking it personally. Shifting your mindset is that way is so effective. So I'm going to hold this container, let your emotions go into the container rather than letting them stick and absorb into me. It's very, very effective. I've already talked about putting up your invisible shield. That's another great way to do it. So it's really important that you be able to sit in hard conversations. That means you've got to be very vulnerable too. And it's not going to be easy. So we can make it a little easier by doing some other things. We need to create a space for listening and communicating. So I recommend that if we have to talk about really hard things, let's select a day and a time. Maybe we have an actual schedule for that. Maybe it's Mondays and Thursdays, or it's every Sunday and it's Friday. Figure out what works with your schedule. You need to come to this conversation well rested and well fed. You need to put a time limit on it. So set a timer. Remember, we can always come back to it after we take a break. Come with specific items or issues to discuss. Now, at times, I encourage couples to put together their own check-in. Some of you learn about check-ins with your therapist in your groups. You can use those, but I also like to take those and change them a little bit so they really adapt to your situation and what it is you need to talk about. So create your own outline of topics, things that you want to talk about, whether you're in your shame and dealing with it, if you're having struggles in your recovery, if you're having any trauma responses, if you're struggling with safety seeking, you can add those things to it and talk about it. You can even add an area where you talk about feelings and even what kind of empathy I need from you. Bring something to write with. So when you're doing that, write down the feelings that you're hearing your partner say in that moment. Take notes when you hear them say what I need. And this works not only does the addict partner do this, but the betrayed partner should do this as well. And then refer back to those notes. So when you see your addict partner struggling, your betrayed partner struggling, go back to your notes. It might give you some insight. It might help you to step into that empathy a little more. And I think that's just it's a key, because sometimes we lose sight, especially when we're limbic and we're not connected to the front part of our brain, we're not prefrontal. So I'm in fight, flight, freeze. All that information leaves me. And so it's nice to have something to refer back to help me ground, to help me step back into understanding. Use your communication recovery format. So that means I'm going to listen without interrupting. So I've got to bite my tongue or I've got to take notes, but I do not interrupt. Then before I speak back, I'm going to ask permission to respond. So I'm going to say something like that. Can I give you some feedback? Can I share my feelings with you? Can I make sure I understand what you just said to me? That one is very, very important. So then you're going to reflect back very first. You're going to say back the exact words you heard your partner say, because I'm seeking to understand. So I'm taking the data I heard, I'm saying it back to my partner, and I'm confirming that I received the data correctly. So I'm attuning to what my betrayed partner or even my addict partner is trying to say to me before I give any input. I've got to make sure. So you're going to say things like, did I get that right? Tell me again so I understand. So if, let's say, you totally blew it, you didn't get it, have your partner repeat it again, and then reflect back again, checking in to see if you got it right. You can say things like, tell me more about that. So we've got to make sure we're on the same page before we kind of get into maybe some of the other things, the needs that we need to talk about, or some of the difficult issues that might be coming up. Another thing that I like that I've come across, and that is an idea from Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, who really focuses on empathy as being a really important component of helping couples heal in betrayal. And she talks about focused listening. And with this exercise, you sit face to face, knee to knee, and you look directly into each other's eyes, and then you talk and you keep the topic to 3 minutes. Then after that one person for 3 minutes shares what's going on for them, the other partner is going to repeat back the betrayed partner's words only, the addict partner's words only. We are not filtering it through judgment. We're not coming to conclusions. We're just stating back the exact words we heard them say. And then you finish that by asking, did I get that right? And if you did, your partner will say, yes, that's exactly what I said. Or they're going to say, no, it's not quite that. It's more this, this, and this. And then you'll repeat back again everything you heard your partner say and ask, did I get that right? It's a great way to learn to attune to each other, because sometimes we might think our partner's telling us something and we're taking it a certain way, and that's not what their intention is. So be aware also, if you're an addict partner, of how you respond to the betrayed partner. So instead of saying things back to them when you communicate, well, at least I'm not as bad as this addict, or at least I don't do this, or I'll never get it right for you, will I? Or it's never going to get better because you're never going to get over these feelings. We have to be very aware of how we respond. I encourage you that if you don't know how to respond with empathy, work with your therapist, go into your group, ask to process. What are some phrases I can use that share empathy? And it would be things like, that must be really hard for you when that happens, or when I do that, or I can understand why you'd feel that way. I would if I were in your shoes, or I'm so sorry you're hurting. I've been there and it's really painful. And Brene Brown, I love what she says. Her statement is, it sounds like you're in a hard place now, so tell me more about it. And that gives the person an opportunity to share even more. So in conclusion, empathy really is simple. And Brene Brown kind of whittled it down to this. She says, empathy has no script. There is no right or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. And so empathy really is about connection. It's about together identifying and understanding emotions and finding that moment where you can come together in that same emotion. And when we feel that same emotion at the same time, that's where the connection takes place. And that's the greater work you're going to be doing in your addiction recovery work, in your betrayal healing work, and as you come together as a couple. So I hope those ideas are helpful. I know we can go even deeper into any one of those, but I think that's a really good overview of how we can start to build empathy.
Yeah, well, and I think that building empathy is a great way to phrase it, because, I mean, of course, we get partners that are going like, he needs to have, and I'm going to use he and she pronouns, please. It's just for convenience. But he needs to have empathy for what he's done to me. But like you just found out about this, 2 weeks ago, like, so not there. You talked about how, as addicts, we are averse to emotions, and we are looking at every way we can possibly not have to experience negative emotions. I think, you have talked about accountability, and I have referred to your previous webinar on accountability. I think it's so valuable this is the accountability. You talked about, having a therapist that holds you to things, and I get lots of people that go, oh, he really loves his therapist, but he's not making any progress. And I'm like, that's scary to me, because, respecting your therapist. If you overly like your therapist as an addict, you're probably not getting any pushback. You're not getting held to any accountability. You're not probably really doing the work, so you can respect your therapist and not go, oh, I love going to my therapist and talking about, why my betrayed partner, why my partner is so horrible and they're so mean to me and don't they understand, or whatever it is. I'm making this up, but those conversations actually happen. So I think it's really important to have that accountability. And you talked about, and I want to touch on this. You talked about you see partners, finding that safe zone if their addict partner is doing the work. And I want to go, but Debbie, not every addict is willing to do that. So how do I, as a partner, find that safety? And where do I look for empathy, if my addict isn't able yet or ever to do that? So, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, I do. It's really important that we have that element of empathy in our healing work. So if you are struggling with an addict partner who's really not doing recovery, it means that you're going to have to somehow find that support, that empathetic support elsewhere. And it's just unfortunate that it's that way. If you've got a good therapist, that is one of, the environments where you're going to feel that empathy. That's why I feel like groups are so important, because oftentimes when I'm a betrayed partner, my addict partner is not doing the work, I am feeling so alone. I'm feeling powerless. I am feeling confused. I'm feeling hopeless. And there is such a sense of isolation. And when I get into a group, and I've got other people sharing exactly the same things that I'm experiencing, the same things I'm feeling, I'm connecting with those people. So the fact that my partner is not doing recovery, although it's difficult, it becomes in many ways more manageable. It's still hard, I'm not going to lie, but now I've got this network of support because people are there understanding me. Because oftentimes the betrayed partner is hearing the addict partner criticizing them and coming back at them like, you're asking too much. And, I am doing recovery. Let me do it my way. I'm just telling you the things I've heard partners say. And so that's, very, very scary as a betrayed partner to hear that. And so all of a sudden, it's you need people there to go, yeah, he's not doing his recovery work, but you're going to be okay. And we're going to support you. Turn to us, share with us how you're feeling, because I can even heal with other people. I teach this concept in my groups, and that is, oftentimes we think that I have to heal my betrayal trauma with the person who betrayed me. That's the only person that can help me heal. That's not true. We do heal in connection with human people, other human beings. Right? That's the empathy piece, right? That connection piece supports us. It helps us emotionally regulate. But there are times that our addict partner is not doing the work. And so therefore, I do need to find somebody else to turn to help me in the different aspects of my healing. So it might be if my partner can't show me empathy right now and they're still working on that, then I go to my therapist. I find an empathetic group member. If my addict partner isn't doing recovery, then maybe I go ahead and I choose to do my own recovery and find supportive people that are there to kind of encourage me and support me in the ways I'm not feeling supported, maybe in my relationship. So those are just a few thoughts that I had off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, those are really helpful. I have a couple more points. I know we've got questions, but you talked about what do you need in this moment? And I think sometimes it can be so overwhelming, on either side of the relationship. So even if it's like, and I love that you talked about a structured time to talk. I think having parameters around it so the addict can reach out to a sponsor before and after you do the bookends. A partner can do the same thing and get support, but that there's this plan so it isn't 24/7 something coming at me or we're going to talk for 4 hours about this and we're just going to keep picking. It's like the timed and the back and forth. I find to be super helpful to have those parameters. But sometimes it's like in the moment, like you don't even know what you need. And so I think it's one of those things, if you can ask when you are, struggling like that, is there something that would be helpful? And then like if the partner is able to say, yes, I would like a hug, or I don't know if that's the right thing, but, but then if the addict is going, we've talked before about this, would you like a hug? It takes one less decision off. So having a couple of ideas or something, if the partner or the person that's struggling doesn't know exactly what they need in the moment, having conversations, communication about these things is so key. And I love that you talked about being curious, because I find that is the most, in fact, I went to a 12-step meeting today and we talked about, I talked about that because I was like, having dialogues with people are people. And you talked about, Oh, fruit fudge. I had it. You had, you cannot be defensive and have empathy at the same time. And I was like, and I can't be grateful and have resentments at the same time.
Yes.
So if I'm, if I'm being curious, then I'm not defensive, because if I'm trying to understand, am I getting this right? Am I understanding? Am I looking through your lens? Yeah, one of my friends talked about, it's a prism, because we're looking at the same thing, but we're looking through different sides of it. So we see things just a little different, but it's the same thing, but it's, it's our lens of those things. And I think that that's so helpful. And then one more thing, and then I'll turn it over to questions, but, the just being there, I remember a friend had a spouse die, and he said the most meaningful thing for him was another friend came up, sat down, and wasn't trying to fix it, wasn't, just said, I can't be in your shoes, but I'm here for you. Silence, and just was there in the presence. And that was, that person talked about how meaningful that was. And I thought, whether we're a friend or whatever, if sometimes it's just being present, not defensive, that can really help us, help someone. So,
Yes.
okay, we've got questions. I don't want to ignore these. Okay, so the first question, Debbie, no one ever talks about sexual experiences the betrayed has missed out on due to commitment to her husband and family. How to cope with jealousy, for lack of a better word.
So I'm trying to understand that question completely.
So my take on this is, you've gone out and had all these, sexual experiences, and I've been faithful to you, or the other thing is, you haven't been, and this happens a lot with, porn and sex addiction. The other person isn't available. So I don't feel like my sexual needs and urges are being met because you're off doing whatever. So either way, I'm missing out.
Okay, this is really complex, this question. And I'm going to take this question, I'm going to use it as a challenge, because we're going to go deeper on this in one of our next webinars.
I love it.
I'm going to start researching this one. And so let's take the sexual experiences part and see if we can just set it aside for a minute. And I'm going to kind of focus more on how to cope with the jealousy, or lack of a better word, okay? Because I think there's several parts to this, this whole sexual thing as we talk about it in recovery. One of them is with the betrayed partner, is I've got to understand my own feelings around my sexuality. I've got to understand, my own sexual development to some degree, as far as attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, how I see it. There's all of that. And then we have to throw in that all of the trauma I've had around sexual experiences, either, as I became sexual in my current relationship, with my addict partner, or my partner who's got porn addiction. So, we've got to kind of we got to look at past, we got to look at present, and we're trying to develop a healthier future, is basically what we're doing. So a lot of times, for you to cope with that jealousy, I would say you're going to have somebody, a therapist, to help you with that, because you need to go deeper on that one. And if I was in an office with a client, one of the things I might do is work on identifying what's underneath that jealousy. What's the deeper emotion, or what is the negative belief? So here's a really great way to think of it. And I love my trauma tree analogy. I write it on my board every time a client first comes in. And so I write a big tree with a trunk, and we've got roots, right, growing in the ground. And the leaves and the branches of the tree, that's your jealousy. So those are the symptoms we're experiencing, the situations we're dealing with. So there's a lot of jealousy based on the sexual experiences of my addict partner. And as a betrayed partner, right, I've got feelings like I missed out. I'm having jealousy maybe because I didn't get to have those experiences like they did. Maybe I'm jealous because they were doing it with other people and it excluded me. So we've got to identify that. Then we've got to look at what is supporting and creating those thoughts, those feelings, those emotions that are coming up for you. And that's going to be the negative beliefs. That's the wiring in your brain. So is the wiring in your brain that, I'm not deserving, or it could be I'm not good enough, or I'm all alone. So we've got to kind of get deeper on that. And then I always like to go deeper into the root of it and go, okay, there are other experiences that you've had in this relationship where you felt like this, or earlier in life, that kind of, that first moment, you kind of got those body sensations where you felt that jealousy and you felt abandoned and all of that, you know, and then we can kind of understand, have a little more understanding. Here's what I find about awareness. A lot of times emotions decrease when all of a sudden we shine the light on it and we have understanding about it. We get to the root of it. And all of a sudden we're going, oh, that's it. Now I know what I need to work on and what to do about it. That's kind of frustrating for clients as well, because we don't know what to do with it at first, but we just now have this awareness. So I encourage you to get into your own therapist and kind of really get detailed on, okay, what have you missed out on due to commitment to your husband? You know, really get clear on that. I do some journaling, some narrative therapy right here in the moment. And talk about your jealousy. Man, I would just do probably a journal dump on my jealousy. Everything I'm jealous about, all the feelings, all the thoughts I've had about jealousy. What do I tell myself about my jealousy? What created my jealousy? I mean, we just want to get it out of your body. This is going to give you so much awareness. And so start with that, because all of that funnels into, right, the sexual experiences that you're having as a betrayed partner, as well as your future sexual experiences. So I guess to kind of circle back around, get into your therapist, figure out specifically what you feel like you've missed out on, discuss it with your therapist, maybe work on your trauma tree and figure out what are the negative beliefs about yourself, the wiring in your brain that's coming up, that's making these feelings more intense and taking you back into those traumatic sensations and those, you know, the trauma responses that you might be having around this. And then do a lot of journaling. My clients don't realize that journaling is actually therapy. So if I'm dealing with something really hard and I go and journal, believe it or not, I'm processing in that moment. I am helping my brain. I'm calming down my crazy monkey mind chatter. I'm getting to my calmer mind in that moment. I'm connecting to prefrontal. I'm back into logic and reasoning, and I'm putting it onto paper. And we have insight when we get to that place. So start with that. Then I'm going to take on the challenge. I would welcome the person who asked this question. They're welcome to circle back around to me with any specific things that they want to know. So feel free to reach out to me at debbiemcraecounseling@gmail.com and give me some more specifics, and I will include that. But I think that's a really great thing, a really great topic for us to go a little bit
I
deeper.
do too. And I was thinking grief, you know, that there feels like there's grief
Yes.
around this as well. And you've done a great, you know, series on grief too. But yeah, I think that is interesting. Okay, recovering sex and love addict 1 year post discovery. A month ago, my partner disclosed to me that she had an ongoing emotional and sexual affair that ended 20 years ago. I'm still in crisis and do get unregulated at times. I feel that a show of remorse and touch of empathy from her would go a long way towards my healing, but I just don't get it from her. She has said that her resentments, I assume with me and my addiction, keep her from saying sorry. In my recovery, shame was my hurdle into empathy. I feel stuck. How can I move forward if we can't even get started?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Well, first of all, easy answer is find a really good couples therapist. And I'm going to tell you, a good couples therapist will challenge you. And at times you may not like that couples therapist, but that couples therapist needs to have empathy. They need to have understanding. They need to have insight. They need to have awareness. They need to connect the dots. They need to create this safe space and container in their office so we can talk about hard things. We can stay regulated. So that's the easy answer. But for you, you're right. You're in crisis. So you're kind of going through that, you know, 1 month to 1 year period where you've got to get yourself stabilized. So that's where you're going to work on really getting yourself grounded. By that, I mean, I'm more connected to prefrontal cortex, logic, reasoning, emotional regulation from that part of my brain. So I'm going to have to be focusing on things like my dailies. So I'm more focusing on those 4 areas every day, where I'm doing 2 things in that physical aspect to support my physical body, 2 things daily to feed my spirit, support my spirituality, however you look at it. 2 things that are more emotional, self-care type things, like what do I need in this moment? Or what can I do every day that kind of fills me back up? And last one is relationally. So I stay connected with other people, because oftentimes when we are in crisis, we want to isolate. That's very, very common. So that connection is very important. And it's not always with the partner who's betrayed you. So you've got to recognize that. You've got to connect with somebody. The other thing you've got to do is your mindfulness practice. So maybe for you, if you've got all sorts of feelings right now and they're just coming out, you don't understand them, journal. Really understand what's going on for you. That's one way to process, those types of emotions for you. I love also the talking boundary that I mention often. And with that, I would use that with, when I heard you say this, I see you do this, or I hear you say this, right? Go into what are the stories I'm telling myself in that moment. So you've got these stories, these thoughts around what you're experiencing in the moment. It's really good insight, because then it takes us into, what am I feeling? What are my real feelings? So we've got to go really deep. I imagine you're feeling abandoned and hurt. I mean, if I were in your shoes, I would even feel probably even scared and very panicky, right? Because, now you're both experiencing kind of the same thing and dealing with the same thing. It's like a double whammy. And so really get to those feelings and then start identifying, okay, what do you need for safety in this relationship? So that is that 4th part of the boundary is, here's what I need moving forward. Here's what, would be helpful, or here's the boundaries I'm putting into place. So for a little bit, you might have to kind of step back and do some work on your own stabilization, getting through your own crisis, and also getting clarity on, okay, what would showing remorse and a touch of empathy look like for you? So I would take that, that 4-part talking boundary. Number 1, share the data. Number 2, write down all the stories or the thoughts you're telling yourself about what you see and what you hear, the data. Number 3, the emotion that the data and that feeling, the stories and the data bring up. And number 4, here's what I need. Okay, here's my boundary I need to put into place for safety. So if you can get clarity on what does that look like, start simple and slow. Go to check-ins if she's willing to do a check-in. For you guys, I would keep your check-ins really short. I would probably do a 5-minute check-in, and I wouldn't do it every day, maybe 3-4 times a week. If you get dysregulated, stop, take a break, come back a little bit later. And maybe in that, include in your check-in, here's one thing I need from you this week. Would you be willing to? So you make that vulnerable request in the beginning. And if your partner can show up, they will. If they can't, maybe they're working on some of their own things. Like I said earlier, if your partner can't give you empathy, then go find somebody who can, because you do need that support. I'm going to go back to the last part of your question. You said in my recovery, shame was my hurdle to empathy. I'm so glad that you recognized that. And remember, your partner who just has disclosed all this is also dealing with denial. They've moved out of denial now. Now they're not moving really heavily into their shame, because I've now shared it, and we kind of go back and forth. And, your partner's also taking accountability for what she's done. And so they move back and forth. So it's a really hard time for the betrayed partner to watch all that happening as well. So I don't know. It's been about, a month ago that your partner disclosed. You're so early in this. You really are. And it's a hard space to be in. What I can say is, if you will do the work, if you'll see your therapist, you'll do what I said about doing your dailies, doing a mindfulness practice every day, reaching out and making sure you connect with healthy human people who can support you in logical, wise ways, you will regulate quickly. You are not going to stay in this space forever. You will move forward. Does it take work? Yes, it does. Is it possible? Absolutely. I see it all the time, and I see it happen quickly. So anyway, any other thoughts on that, Tammy?
Well, the couples therapist, that understands these issues, not just a regular marriage therapist, but, I remember the coupleship is the client for that. So neither of you, I think really key to all this, first of all, you're still together after a year and then a month. But I think have the conversation and journal about this. And journaling is researched that it does really help. We've had Harriet Hunter did a great webinar on that. Email me, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity if you want more on that. But I was thinking, what is your goal? If your goal is to move forward together, then here's where you're at, and how do you navigate that gap? Like hearing I'm sorry would be trite to me. I know, you're saying she hasn't even said I'm sorry. We say this all the time to addicts. Don't just say I'm sorry, because it doesn't mean anything. It really is the actions. But if the two of you have the actions of we're working towards, and it's hard right now, but we're working towards moving this relationship forward, that to me would be more telling. But getting professional help, because this is really, it's difficult enough when there's one person who has betrayed and there's a betrayed partner. When it's on both sides, it doesn't magically even it out and go, okay, now we're neutral. No, it makes it more complicated. So getting help for that would be really key to all of this. So
yeah.
Okay. We have a couple more questions. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them. We're going to see. Okay, my addict partner is doing the work. However, he doesn't speak when he gets home. I don't want to be chasing him and asking him if he attended a group or did therapy go, or if he had a triggered kind of day. What is the best way to address this? I worry daily if this is a recovery day or a slip relapse day.
Okay, here's a really quick answer. Number one, you've got to be doing check-ins, structured check-ins. So you're going to want to sit down and you're going to do it very, very similar to what you do in a group. You're going to share one word that identifies how you are feeling emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally. Then you can also share, here's what I've struggled with this last week. For a betrayed partner would be safety seeking. For an addict, and even shame. For an addict partner would be, am I having, any slips? It might be your own shame. It might be your own denial. What I'm currently working on. It can even be what I'm doing to stay regulated, what I'm doing in my recovery work, so you're aware. It could be something I learned this week in recovery, or one takeaway from group. It could be sharing, here's one need I have from you during this next week. But come up with a structure. Don't overdo it. I find that, and don't make it long, because if you make it long, you won't repeat it. The other thing that I would recommend is use the talking boundary. Get clarity on what you need. So then if your partner's coming home not talking to you, during one of the check-ins, ask if you can just share your talking boundary. Pull out the journal or the notebook you've put it in, and you're going to say, when I see you come home and not talk to me, here's the stories I start telling myself. Oh, he must be acting out because he feels like he's pulled away. I start telling myself, I wonder how many slips he's had. He must have had a slip. I start telling myself, gosh, this isn't going to work out. Just share all of that. And then when I see that, and then I start thinking that, I am so scared that our marriage isn't going to work out. So when you come home, would you be willing just to say, hi, how was your day? Can we start with that? Or, I need to be doing a check-in with you at least every other day. Would you be willing to do that? I need it for safety. Somebody who's truly doing recovery will say yes, they will be willing to do it. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and as far as someone being triggered, that's they need to work with their sponsor on that, their therapist. And you aren't your spouse's like, you aren't responsible for their recovery. You are about your safety. So if that person isn't, like Debbie said, isn't as available, then it's going to create that gap. So it's really fair to say, when you do this, then the story I'm telling myself is that you are not safe for me to be around, that you're likely having a slip. So therefore I'm going to pull away from you rather than lean into working towards our relationship. So, but it's really about what you need for your safety, not what that person is doing or not doing.
Mhm.
Now, if there's not kids in the home, then I think putting my recovery schedule on the fridge is a great idea. Then everybody knows, like then there's just like I don't even have to, like it just is information. Now, do addicts lie? Absolutely. Trust your gut. But
Mhm.
worrying, I said this to somebody else earlier today. It's like worrying is like a rocking chair. It will keep you busy, but it doesn't get you anywhere. What will help you is focusing on what you can do. The only thing I can take care of is me, my actions, my reactions, my safety, those things. I can't change another person, darn, as much as I want to. So what you need for your safety, and trust your gut, not words. It's really action. So okay, next question. Do you have a couple more minutes or?
Yeah, I do. I'm
Okay,
good.
okay. I'm a betrayed partner who has also betrayed my partner over 20 years ago, but I just disclosed to him. So he is currently, so I think this is the flip side, going through
Mhm.
betrayal trauma. I was reflecting about why it's so hard for me to have empathy for him when he gets triggered. And I think it's because of all the resentment I have for him for all the years he has been disconnected because of his sex addiction. How can I get over the resentment so I can be empathetic towards him?
Okay, I think I have an idea on this one. So, resentment is actually a form of anger. And I did a 2-part seminar on grief and loss. And one of the things we have to do when we're experiencing betrayal trauma as a partner in their healing, we have got to allow ourselves to feel that anger and learn from it and work with it. So it might be, I'm going to do a piece of artwork on what my anger feels like, what my resentment feels like. I'm going to write a letter to my resentment. I am really going to kind of dig deep in my resentment because I do believe it's part of, for you, the hurt and the pain that you're experiencing as a result of the loss and the grief that a betrayed partner goes through. So that's one of the things. And again, like we talked about earlier, I'm going to circle back around. A good couples therapist who specializes in understanding empathy and how to move through resentment will really help you. Now, a couple of things on that. Both partners do need to have some ability to regulate before you go into couples work. I'm going to tell you why. Otherwise, you're going in every time to a couples session and somebody's getting dysregulated, and we're spending the whole time putting out fires and trying to get everybody regulated. So you do want to be in a place where you can communicate and talk about some hard things. And even if you go to get dysregulated, you can kind of regulate fairly quickly. So resentment, I think, is part of that natural process. You do need to do your own work with your own therapist on that. So you have somebody that can talk to you, validate you. I totally understand why you're resentful. I mean, it would be hard not to be. You would not be human if you didn't feel resentment.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, but but resentment won't get you anywhere. So kind of what we were talking about is like if your goal is, to have a relationship together. Yeah, I get all the hurt. I get all of that, but uh someone told me, and I really hated this, that resentment is letting somebody live rent free in my head. And I really hated that because then it was telling me that it was my fault. And that's not what they really meant. It was actually somebody that was willing they were willing to take a risk with me and tell me there's a way to get through this. And with addiction, let's remember that, sex addiction isn't about sex. It's not about how great sex is. It's not about, it's a maladaptive coping mechanism. It is betrayal. It is hurtful. I get all that.
Mhm.
I'm not minimizing any of that. But his disconnection with you was also his isolation, and his disconnection from everyone and everything. In recovery, we get healthy connection. Dr. Rob says all the time, the opposite of addiction is healthy connection. So in recovery, we can connect and we can have deeper relationships. We can have meaningful connections. All of those things. In brokenness and in addiction, we don't. So I think working towards your healing on both sides of the equation, as Debbie said, shame or whatever, but also, how at what cost are you willing to hang on to that at resentment? Or dipping the toe in. Okay, I'm willing to be a little bit
Mhm.
vulnerable. Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
test this out. You know, you guys both, if you're working on this, I promise you, I mean, we see this all the time. You guys can have a deeper, closer, more honest relationship if you're willing, if you're willing to do so. It's gonna take some time.
Mhm.
But what you will gain from this, if you're willing, will be, so much better than either of you have had, so far. So
And let me add one other thing to that one though,
please.
too, and that is also check in, because we've kind of got that double situation going there where you both have been betrayed. And for you, look and see if denial, if there's any shame there, if
Mm,
that's also part of the resentment piece, right? Because typically we can't move into into that empathy. Resentment can also come as a result of our own shame as well.
mhm.
So, I mean, again, that's where you go in and you have a therapist kind of help you
Yeah.
unpack that and look at all the layers to that.
Yeah, well, and that has to be painful because you held a secret for 20 years, so and again, there's no, oh, now we've magically, we're even. There's hurt on both sides and there's work to do on both sides. So, okay, the last question, this goes towards your
Mhm.
future webinar. Follow up to the first question regarding jealousy. The fact that the addict had multiple sexual experiences while the betrayed partner was committed, this is infuriating, aka mixed with jealousy. At some level, that the sex addict was able to experience multiple sexual experiences while the betrayed partner didn't. Unfortunately, the result for the sex addict is that their experience turned into addiction. And again, you're like, there's a misperception that that sex addiction, it's intensity, but it's not intimacy. It's intensity, but it's not connection, and it turned into addiction. So what did he get for his sexual experiences? Disconnection from you and a sex addiction. So so the grass is greener and all of those kind of things, I mean, at some point, yes, there are lifestyle choices, but to me, it's really, you know um perceiving that it was all great and we had so much fun and all of this, an addict who's being truthful will tell you that isn't what it is, and just like, alcoholism isn't about how great alcohol tastes, or, I mean, gaming is about intensity. All of those things are about intensity and numbing out, escaping emotions. It's not about connection or, wow, that was so. And for so many of us, we're chasing the fun that we had one time, and trying to recreate that, and it just doesn't happen. So
Mhm.
Debbie, what are your thoughts?
Another thought I had on that too, and the jealousy piece was, I don't know if you went through therapeutic formal disclosure yet or not, because sometimes, as we hear details of our partner's sexual acting out or their pornography use or whatever's involved, that's when we become aware of maybe how extensive the behavior was, the different, like you said, sexual experiences. And so oftentimes I will have clients who have a really hard time getting that out of their mind. So if I had somebody who had jealousy, I'd also look and kind of check in and see, okay, how was your jealousy, prior to therapeutic formal disclosure, post therapeutic formal disclosure? And then I would probably also go and look at, okay, are there aspects of that, that still kind of stick in your mind? Is it something that we can reprocess using something like EMDR? So that's eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, or something like accelerated resolution therapy. I have found that by using that with my clients, it's very effective in bringing that intensity, like that jealousy, down, and kind of, in a way, we're kind of rewiring the brain. We're helping the brain reprocess the trauma around the jealousy. So that's another thought I had too that would be helpful as well, and might help you be able to kind of step into a place where there's a little more, empathy as well.
Yeah, yeah. And well, and I'm sorry that you're jealous of the disconnected, sexual experiences. Yes, it's a thing and it's something to do and all that kind of stuff. But wow, in my life, the meaningful connections with real people, have been the most important thing. It's I mean, I could go on, but I won't. So
Yeah.
so I thank you all for being here. Stop well, Matt will be on next week with Scott, and Debbie and I will be back in 2 weeks, but join lots of resources on seeking integrity. I put the work group, I meant to mention that, for Out of the Doghouse. Debbie mentioned that. It is Dr. Rob's most popular book, and we have a work group on that, but we've got the Betrayed Partner work group starting again in August. So lots of resources for you. Keep coming back. Thank you all. Thank you, Debbie, as
You're
always.
welcome.
So grateful. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.